Welcome to Buckets Live, NBA Finals Edition. We're coming to you live here on youtube.com/the Action Network for game one of the NBA Finals, fourth quarter. The Boston Celtics lead 88-66 over the Dallas Mavericks. Celtics closed -6.5. Total was 214.5. Currently tracking for Celtics -6.5 in the under. I've got Jim Turvey and Brian Fonseca with us. We're going to break down this fourth quarter. We're going to track our bets. We're going to see how these things shake out. And then we will give you live reaction as the game two line populates on BetMGM. Be sure to keep it tuned right here. We'll cover the entire fourth quarter. We'll see if I get suckered into doing any sort of live bets on Dallas out of my abject fear of Luka Doncic. And then we'll get into the game two conversation. So let's start right here, guys. Fonseca, what I want to ask you this in all honesty. What has surprised you from this game about, if anything, about the Boston Celtics performance?
About the Celtics performance?
Yes.
Of really Kristaps Porzingis, because and we'll see how often he does this during the series, but I don't know who reasonably would have expected this coming off the bench in his first game back. You know, he looks like, I don't know if he played a better quarter in his career than the first quarter. Like, that was ridiculous on both ends of the floor. When people were talking about, and we were talking about this, him potentially changing the trajectory of the series, I don't think any of us projected what he was doing right off the bat. And inevitably, Boston, allowed Dallas to gain some steam in the third quarter, but they're putting their foot back on this game, back on their throats, doing what they were doing early on. So, yeah, to me, it really started with Porzingis, but I think the entire team looked phenomenal. Like, right off the bat, their energy, their hustle, they were getting offensive rebounds, which, Dallas looked like they weren't ready for that level of activity. And it's like, dude, you're in the finals. Like maybe play like you're in the finals. So it took them a while to wake up. And this is one of those games that it looked like it was going to get away from them quickly. It did. They came back, kind of a fake comeback in hindsight, because Boston is now up by about 20 again.
Yeah, the great start to the third quarter for Dallas. They kind of started to actually manipulate things a little bit better, but I also think Boston just kind of went cold there from three. And like we talked a lot about this entire series from a shot variance standpoint. Jim Turvey, what's kind of your impression from the first three quarters that we've seen of these NBA finals?
Yeah, I think my first impression has to be that despite them being the team I hate more than any other team on the planet, apparently I'm the Celtics good luck charm, because I flipped off for what was apparently 20-0 run for the Mavs to record WNBA buckets. Came back, Celtics settled in. So I'm the Celtics good luck charm. The irony being, I hate them with a burning passion. However, I was on them this game. This was, the 16-3 against the spread, game one, home favorite thing. They're looking good. They honestly, I think the irony of this is, I think they look good, but not great. I think Porzingis is 100% the story. I think Brian nailed it there. There's no way you could have expected him to come out and have this game. But to me, the secondary guy on Boston who's impressed me, and a guy I know you were on him before the series, in part because of some of the matchup stuff, Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown has been awesome this game. He's done really well on the Luka assignment. Luka's going to get his points. And honestly, maybe in that 6-minute stretch that I missed doing W content, that was when he had his best stretch, so maybe that wasn't Jaylen's best stretch. But I've been impressed overall with Jaylen on offense, on defense. Derek White, that was a guy I was all over before the series. He's playing well. Tatum's actually, maybe unsurprisingly to the haters out there, Tatum's the one who hasn't put it all together, and Boston's still up. This second are they up like 17 or 18? So I do think, we talked about this a ton, Matt, where we wanted to find a spot to fade Boston and we just couldn't find it. And it just looks like this team is better and they're a good matchup. And you don't want to overreact to game one, but it really went pretty much according to the script that we kind of talked out before the series.
Yeah, and I had Brian on for how to bet Mavericks, and like, look, there's a lot of basketball left in the series. Yeah. And I'm not going to be swayed by game one. This was a good outcome for Boston if they hold on. They're up by 17 currently. They're going to need to keep this up. They're going to need to win game two in order to really get a hold of the series. I'll feel very good about them if they do win the first two games. One thing that is key here is like everything that Brian said about Boston and not being as good as like the historical markers, I agree with. And like, I think in every round of these playoffs, and the ATS margin on Boston for the playoffs, I think validates this, that Boston was overrated in the first round versus the Heat without Jimmy Butler. They were overrated the second round versus the Cavs, eventually without Donovan Mitchell and Jared Allen. And they were overrated in the third round versus the Pacers, even though they swept. Like the ATS margin kind of proves that they were overrated by the market. What was interesting to me was that in this spot versus this team, I looked at that and went, wait, what? Because like Fiddle and I talked about it when we did Buckets Live. We are like, what do you expect us to open at? And I was like, it's got to be 7.5. Like this has to be above, like this can't be anything below 6.5. It's got to be 7.5. And then it opened 5.5 and settled immediately at 6 and then moved to 6.5. And that to me was like an indication that the market was probably not. I still feel that the market was soft. Now I'll be very curious to see what that game 2 line is. And before the end of this game, I'm going to get you guys' predictions on what the game 2 line will be. Derek White now racing down and scoring as he adds on to make it a 21-point lead. Live line on this game.
Out, kid.
BetMGM 18.5, the total down to 200.5. That's the surprising part to me is like, I like the over in this game. In first 5 minutes, it was like bucket, 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 bucket. And I was like, I am so right. I am the smartest man. I called it. And then the Mavericks ran into a Celtics switching defense and Porzingis, and their offense just died. And as it does whenever Luka Doncic has a bad game, oh, man, Luka doesn't look healthy. Oh, man, just doesn't. He doesn't look healthy. And then he hits a 3. Oh, Luka might be warming. Which is it? Is he hurt or not? One thing I will say, Brian, one thing I will say, as we go through this, hit me a like and subscribe for the Action Network right now. If you're watching this on youtube.com/the Action Network, give me that like button and subscribe. We will cover all sorts of stuff over the duration of this last quarter, and then we'll get you the live reaction as game 2 hits. We'll talk total, we'll talk side, etc. Brian, I want to go back to Porzingis. Okay, so I heard a little bit today. There were some burblings of like, hey, KP's like not in condition. And so like he's probably going to play more in like spurts. And like it could be messy. Now, I didn't go crazy. I was like, look, I don't, it was soft intel. It was just one of those like the birds are chirping. So like I played like a small same game parlay on his unders, which lost in like 13 seconds. And that's fine because I liked it. Brandon Anderson, if he wins, fine. But by the way, Jim, this is going to get nasty if KP hangs in and is it within range of Jaylen Brown. You and I are going to have to tranquilize Brandon Anderson. Otherwise, he's going to tear up the entire internet. He's so pro KP and so anti JB. But Fonseca, I will say, like, a big key in this, I do want to see what happens in game 2. Porzingis came off the bench and matched up with the Lively minutes, which they have killed in. And Lively looked, for the first time in the playoffs, completely lost versus Kristaps Porzingis. Didn't know how to defend him on screen and roll, didn't know how to defend him in ISO, didn't know how to defend him on cuts. I genuinely don't know what Joe Mazzulla should do here. Like, you just won game 1, and we'll see what the final margin is. Shouldn't they at least keep it on the table to just be like, hey, let's just keep bringing KP off the bench in this series and kind of get away with that? Or do they need to start him?
No, I think you run this back because this actually helps them look a little bit deeper than they are. I think one of Dallas's only advantage in this series from an on-paper standpoint was that they were a deeper team. Not a better team on paper, but a deeper team. And Kristaps Porzingis sort of helps levels that out if you're going to throw him in there in spurts, because they kind of did throw him in there in spurts. It's just that, you know, in his 21 minutes, he's been very, very good. And the other thing about this, and if you're someone who took a long shot for KP to be MVP, what helps you in this game is that everything he's doing is loud. The threes are from like 30 feet. He is protecting the rim very, very well. He's got multiple like emphatic block shots in this game. Got a couple dunks as well. And the crowd is going crazy every time Dallas, for whatever reason, willingly switches a small onto him. And then he's able to post up and go to work from about 16 feet out or whatever the case is. So everything Kristaps Porzingis is doing is loud. He's the guy that he's got the biggest pop in the arena so far, I feel like. Probably second to Bill Walton, if we're being honest. But like Kristaps Porzingis has just been like, that's the other part of this. It's not even just he's playing well. It's like everything he's doing, you feel it more than anything else that's happened in this game. And it's on both ends of the floor. So he's off to a start that I don't think anybody expected. The Jaylen Brown point I thought that Jim brought up was a great one too, because a lot of things that he's doing is loud on defense. Also, he had that steal on Luka Doncic in the second quarter where that, to me, that's where it was like game over, where they went up. I don't remember if it was 24, 26, something along those lines, but it was a steal around half court. he goes up and dunks it on the other end. Jaylen Brown is also probably leading the entire game at looking into the crowd. Like, he is absolutely playing to the crowd in this game. And he's been playing very well. And yeah, I think those two, they're probably really the story here. Not that, nobody else from Boston is producing, but I think that's really it. But actually, yeah, I would keep KP in this sort of role because I think it actually strengthens your bench, especially if you're only going to go 8 deep.
Let's talk about some of the bets that we're sweating here. Jim Turvey, you like the under in the fourth quarter. What was the number that you got on that?
51.5. It's off to a pretty good start. Right now we got 17 points scored, and we're almost halfway through. So we're looking pretty good there right now.
Let me ask you. You mentioned this that you said this on one of our podcasts that historically in on the game one best bets, you said that historically in blowouts in garbage time they tend to go under. Are you going to feel that way if we get Peyton Pritchard and Sam Hauser running up and junking
Sam
threes?
Sam Pritchard is a perfect encapsulation of the Celtics bench, though. I will. I'm going to go with the bigger historical trend here, and the fact that those guys have been the kind of victory cigars for Boston the last 2 years. And Boston, I said this on the on the game one best bets, but last season they were 66-36 to the under in the fourth quarter. This regular season 52-29. This postseason 10-4. So whatever they're doing, if it's maybe they're a good defensive unit, maybe they put up a few too many threes, and they have some games where they go crazy and some where they don't. Whatever they're doing in those fourth quarters, the under is really been an absolute train for them. So off to a good start here, and hopefully we don't have the high variance bubble towards the end, but it hasn't been the case in the past. So I'm thinking we're looking good right now.
Live total is at 196.5 as the Mavericks are on pace for, I don't know, like less than 100 points here, which is not great for Dallas's chances of hanging in the series. Let's talk shot variance real quick. 3-point props were a popular one amongst our entire Action Network crew. Is there anything, by the way, before I get to that, Brian, are you sweating anything here down in the fourth quarter?
So I got Derek White's threes and Drew Holiday's assists already. But it doesn't look like Kyrie's going to get the assist. He needs 3 more, and Derek Lively, I need 2 more rebounds from him. So Lively, we'll see, but he may get taken off the floor if this continues to go the way it's been.
Hey, shout out to Tatum. Tatum got the first double-double we need. So, if this series maybe is looking like it could be a little bit shorter, we got one of our Tatum double-doubles in the bag.
That's awesome, man. And I will say I was really concerned about his rebounding, and he tore them to pieces. He was just really good in terms of his timing and aggressiveness, and caught them off guard. Like I was really impressed by how they were able to do that. I was worried about how those sequences would go. And he was just phenomenal in terms of just watching like really good technique and intensity. Like Tatum was just like, he positioned himself really well. Like Tatum's size really shows out, I feel like, in the series. And I'm sure that Brian will want to note that he has 6 turnovers to 5 assists in this game, and 15 points on 15 shots. But also, I thought he did a really good job of setting the table. I'm going to be curious how many secondary assists he got. Now, we can't bet on those things, but it did feel like he's setting the table. And Mavericks, they really loaded the box on him. And that, to me, when we get to game 2 here in 5 minutes and 17 seconds of game time, that'll have to be something that we got to talk about. What did the Mavs change? I would say that, like, number one is, like, guys, you don't need to cut the head off the snake here. Like, you can win a game in which Jason Tatum has 35 points if he doesn't have 7 assists, 10 plus boards. Like, they need him to not have a double-double. They need him to just be a scorer. And so I honestly think that they need to probably stay home a little bit more, because I was worried about those weak side actions. It's a big reason why I like Jaylen Brown for MVP. And we saw a lot of that where it's like Tatum draws a lot of attention. Weak side, Jaylen Brown drives, picks up an assist. Jaylen Brown shoots, like a lot of those types of things. And Jaylen Brown also just created a lot tonight with 3 steals, 3 blocks, by the way, for Jaylen Brown with 7 to 12 shooting. And he's still 2 up for leading scorer in this game, or for the Celtics, rather, as Luka has 30, because no matter what Luka does, he's just going to have 30 points. It's absolutely ridiculous.
By the way, I'll say one I'm sweating for. So, like I said, I recorded Buckets WNBA with Maria Marino. She said she's got Drew Holiday 12.5 points. He's sitting on 12. So that's a pretty fun sweat here right down the stretch.
That was her leg on Action Island.
Yeah.
So very big and we had Luka Doncic over 31.5 points, which I did not vote for, and he's at 30. So we'll see if he gets there or not.
And then Matt, me, you, and Jay did one that was Tatum rebounds, Tatum assists, Celtics first half, Celtics game. Do you remember what the Tatum assist was? Because other than that, obviously it's looking good.
I believe we are still a half off on Tatum.
Is this 5.5? Okay, so we need that's a good sweat too. Then
probably gonna get the hook on it. We'll see if he comes back in. This is always interesting because if like this is a regular season game, they might just play it out in garbage time. Does Jason Kidd pull the plug here early? Because I will tell you, the Boston Celtics, what usually happens is the home team usually doesn't. The home team's usually like, no, like we're gonna finish this. We're in front of the fans. We're going to make sure that we finish this strong. And the other team is like, screw it. Let's just get ready for game 2 and save our legs. So I'll be curious to see kind of what happens there. Live line on this game, 23.5 over under 195.5. I will ask Brian, what's like the biggest angle that you think you're going to be looking at from a props perspective? And you can think about this for a second. From a props perspective from game 2. I think KP is an obvious one, but I honestly actually think that probably, I wonder if there's going to be an overreaction there. I probably won't bet it. I won't like bet the other way. I won't go contrarian, but I do think like a lot of the sequences, like KP had some in the second quarter where he was feeling it, and it was like triple threat face up, defended by Derek Jones Jr., just like knocking in mid-range, heavily contested stuff. And like that can happen. KP's really good. That's just not like a steady diet of what you want. I do feel like the Mavericks are probably going to be like, okay, we shut the water off on Tatum. We got killed by KP. Let's probably adjust a little bit there. That's going to be probably like the starting point for where I'm going to look at for the Mavericks to make adjustments in game 2.
Me too, because I don't think, and I didn't like their game plan at all. I feel like Boston's not a team where you try to just take off their best player because they're a machine. Like the whole thing with the Celtics is that it's really, I mean, they have great players on their team, but it's really a committee where if you take off one guy, it's not like a Luka Doncic run team like the Mavericks, for example, where if you try to take off Luka, one, you kind of can't, but you get where I'm going here. Then that greatly inhibits the rest of what they can do. Whereas with Boston, it's like, all right, they still have Jaylen Brown. They still have Kristaps Porzingis. They still have Derek White who can get hot from 3. Like they can still manufacture very efficient, very effective offense without their best player. So I would look at prop wise. I would think about what are the adjustments that they can make, and Kristaps Porzingis and Jason Tatum. I'd probably look at them to sort of go in the other direction, meaning maybe Porzingis isn't as loud in game 2 because of what we saw. Now, maybe Dallas doesn't willingly just, hey, Derek Jones Jr., go ahead. I'm not saying that they have a definitive answer for him, but switching guys who are willingly like 6'5", 6'6", 6'7" is something that they simply can't get away with. And then with Jason Tatum, I wonder if his points will bounce back because maybe there's less of an emphasis on trying to cut him off in game 2 from what he can do, and realizing, like you said, Matt, hey, they could actually live with Jason Tatum getting a 30-piece so long as some of the other things go in their direction. Also, in Dallas' side, I would look at some of their players' 3-point props because I think there has to be an understanding that, listen, if you're going to try to beat a team who's basically playing a math equation, like Boston is shooting 41 threes in this game. That's more than half of their field goal attempts, which is something that we expected. Whereas Dallas has shot 25 threes in this game, and they shot about 80 field goal attempts. And I don't care like how well Dallas shoots. If you're only shooting 25 threes in a game against this Celtics team, you just don't have any shot. And I think there's going to be an adjustment there because, as I noted, the top 2 teams in 3-point attempt rate during the regular season were these 2 teams. Boston was at 47, Dallas was at 44. I think Dallas took a slight hit after they reimagined their team in the trade deadline, but they were still above 40 in the playoffs. So this has to come up. So I would look at Dallas players and see what their 3-point props are, because there has to be an emphasis on playing a little bit more balance on the defensive end, but shooting more threes on the offensive end, and stop trying to drive it down Boston's throats a little with results.
Why can't I bet on player minutes live? Because I just said that the road team usually benches guys in blowouts, and the home team keeps their guys on the floor. And the starters are on the floor for the Boston Celtics, and the Mavericks have gone to the bench. So can never get the bets I need, Turvey. I only get the bets that I can lose. As we kind of like head down the stretch here. By the way, boys, do not check the rundown. I want you to not look at the rundown. You already looked at
I haven't opened it yet.
I knew Jim was gonna break it. I knew he was. I
got like 3 screens going here.
I know our producer, Tito, already put there's a in the market. Game 2 is already up. We'll talk about that as this game winds down here. Brian, before that gets spoiled for you, give me a guess on what you think the Game 2 line is going to be.
Oh, I kind of want to say like 8.5 feels a little ambitious, but it's kind of was my knee-jerk reaction when you brought it up. I feel like it has to be like 7 or 8.5.
Okay. We'll see what BetMGM posts at. Currently in the market, we've got a lineup that is the Dallas Mavericks are 7.5-point dogs in Game 2. So that represents a 1-point bump over the Game 1 closing line, a 2-point bump over the opener, which disappeared almost immediately after the Mavericks clinched their spot in the finals. I'll be very curious to see what the market does with this, because public was all, this is a great night for the books. The public was all over the Mavericks. Money line, spread. I loved it. They loved Dallas in this game. And now obviously there's been a reaction. I talked a lot about this on all the shows that we did, about 1,700 hours of content, I think, this week. And then I wrote about it as well, that despite all that public money, the Sharps had moved this from 5.5 to 6.5. They've gone from 5.5 to 6 and then to 6.5. Right before tip, there was a 6 that popped, which isn't surprising to me because there was such handle on Dallas in this game. I'll be very curious to see what the Sharps do, because they only pushed it to 6.5 and no further. Like, we still kept seeing all these moves, and the books would not move it to 7.5. So I'm going to be very curious to see if the Sharps immediately hit the 7.5, because they didn't want Game 1 at 6. They didn't want Game 1 at 6.5 enough to move it to 7. So I kind of wonder if there's going to be a little bit of a pull back the other direction. I'll get into some trends after this one wraps up. Tracking on props here. Jason Tatum still at 5. Oof.
Oh wait, he passed it. Pull up.
No, Pritchard.
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 You bum.
You bum. By the way, the fact that the Celtics were able to get quality minutes from Sam Hauser, a plus 19 in this game, that needs to scare the ever-loving hell out of Mavericks fans.
Really good.
Like, they needed to be able to, and like those were Luka minutes. Now, it's reasonable, I think, to say that Game 1 is like a feel-it-out game, Jim, right? So It's like a feel-it-out for most great players. And like, Luka's been bad overall in Game 1s. His Game 1 record is very poor, even though, as Brandon Anderson has noted, he's 7-1 against the series spread in terms of games, right? So we look at this one and we go, it's like a feel-it-out game. I'll also say, just like, Luka doesn't, I was arguing about this with Sean Little, who's also on Buckets. He was like, he needs to play with more intent. And I was like, so you've never watched Luka. Okay. It's like, he's very sporadic in how he chooses these types of things. I'm not saying that Luka's like doesn't have killer instinct. He kills everything, but that's kind of the point, is that Luka doesn't really be like, I'm going to hammer this matchup. Like, I'm going to hunt you down and I'm going to pick on you over and over and over again. He's not wired like that, at least not yet. And so I wonder, though, in Game 2, if that will be one of the adjustments. It's like, man, you got to get Luka into these things. But at the same time, Jim, I worry about that from let's play these guys off the floor, because then I know Brian likes them to slow the game down. I don't think you don't want them slowing the game down in terms of Luka dribble. Your offense isn't going to be productive enough to keep pace with the Celtics shooting. So my question for you, as I get through all this, is, do you think that Luka will be able to make quality adjustments while not junking up the offense too much by attacking maybe Pritchard and Hauser in Game 2?
You know, the thing that really stuck out to me watching the game today was how easy the offense looked for Boston and how uneasy it looked for Dallas, how much of a struggle it was to get their baskets. And listen, Luka and Kyrie can absolutely do that. But, you know, coming in this series, to take a long road to your question, Kyrie was one who, you know, people like Kyrie, you can put anyone on him. He's Kyrie. It doesn't matter as much. I don't know, man. Like this defensive backcourt really had him looking pretty flummoxed today. These guys aren't going to be kept down the whole series. And I do think that, you know, I'm pretty surprised we got 7.5 here. I think it's pretty telling to move a full point off of a Game 1 that most of the Sharps were all over Boston anyways. I'm pretty interested by us getting 7.5 here. I don't see a big path forward for Dallas. I think because of the variance, I think Brian made a really good point that Dallas is going to have to get up more threes. I think that is, this could be a really good game script game to put together a little same game parlay where it's like PJ Washington hits his threes. Kyrie does have the Kyrie game. And maybe it's not actually Luka needing to score as much. It's that the other parts chip in. They shoot a lot of threes. On the defensive end, they have a little bit better. Celtics hit a lot of crazy shots. That Hauser three where he didn't even bring the ball down, he's a good shooter, but that's an incredible shot. So maybe if some of that's a little bit closer and Kyrie and PJ are able to get going, that's the route forward for Dallas. But from a series perspective, I really don't see a whole lot of paths forward for Dallas here. It's kind of just showed what I thought, which is that Boston is a much better team and that it is not a good matchup. And I'm not coming off that much after seeing tonight's game.
I love it. I love it. So I was right about everything. Thank you all. Good night. That was Tim Turner's breakdown of game one, which, hey, look, it feels good right now for those of us that were on Boston to be like, hey, this is exactly what we kind of thought.
Well, I'll say this. Joe texted me and Brandon and said, hey, should we be nervous to not have sweep? And Brandon and I instantly, not even knowing the other was texting, both said, LOL, no. Like, it's not going to be a sweep. Dallas is going to get some games. Boston will variance their way into some losses. I don't think this thing is over. And once if it gets to 6 games, anything can happen, a rolled ankle, whatever it is. But as these two teams stand right now, I just don't see a very viable path forward for Dallas in this matchup. It's just such a bad matchup for them. And on top of the fact that they're the worst team, it's tough to go 0-2 on those two pretty key factors.
Some bets I lost tonight. Josh Green over 3.5 points. I needed 2 buckets from him. He went 0-2. I thought he was going to play in the series. And he did, and he looked completely shook and like he's not ready for this level. So not going to go back to that one. Maybe he can get together for game 2. Derek Lively over 6.5 rebounds. The foul trouble really hurt there. I think he probably would have grabbed enough in this game had it not been for the foul trouble. But that one, look, if I'd known that KP was matching up his minutes, I definitely would not have played Lively over rebounds. I wouldn't have gone down that road because I was expecting it to be Lively versus old man
Tatum.
Horford and Tatum, and instead it was Porzingis, and that was not an enjoyable experience for me betting that. Did have Boston minus 5.5 as my biggest play though. The total I think is gonna be really interesting to see when this game pops, and to see kind of what this looks like, because I don't know how much you take, Brian, from the Mavericks offensive performance. Like, where do you get to with the Mavericks offensive performance here? How do you judge that? Kyrie was so bad in this game. Like, I hear what you're saying, Jim, and I like that Jim was like, some people were like, it doesn't really matter who you put on him. You put my fucking name on it. It's okay.
Wait, you said that? I thought you're not the Kyrie guy, are you?
I was definitely like, look, I think that there will be games where Derek and Drew do well on him, and there are probably games where Kyrie just does what he wants. Because
I actually agree with that. I think that there will be 1 or 2 games that Kyrie does that, but I think overall I do think that there is some impact, and I think that on a night-to-night basis, I don't think he's going to be able to bring it 6 games worth. I'm actually surprised that you are on that corner. That surprised me a little bit.
I mean, I like Drew guarding him. I like that they mostly kept Jaylen Brown on him. That was good. Fonseca though, look, Kyrie was 12 points on 19 shots tonight. And a minus 19, the worst on the team. That's glaring. PJ Washington 0 of 3 from 3. Kyrie 0 of 5 from 3. THJ played 7 minutes and missed a 3. Luka was 4 of 12 from 3. Now, I don't love the looks that the Mavericks in general get from 3. I don't think that they generate great offense, but I'm also an extreme critic of theirs. So I'll ask you just, is it kind of natural to kind of expect some offensive regression here in game 2?
Yeah, because I think the main thing is just simply put, they need more threes, and I think they'll hit better than 26% of them. Like, those 2 things just have to happen if they're going to have a shot. Like, I don't like overreacting to game 1s. We've seen throughout the course of how many times in NBA history where game 1 is like this wild thing, and then the entire series changes in the next game because like the next game is nothing like we just saw in the opener. Not to say that that's definitively going to happen in game 2, but I'd be surprised if Boston just stomps them out again and Dallas just comes out and does the same thing where it's like, hey, doesn't matter who's guarding Porzingis, and we're going to still try to attack and get our 2s. And Luka Doncic is going to look out of sorts at times and just laughing more than he's actually. I felt like he was laughing more than he was complaining to the officials in this game, which is uncharacteristic. And I also think Kyrie Irving, he's playing too happy. Like, I understand, like, he's a redemption character in this story, but he's like, there was one point where he was about to argue a call against the referee, and then he kind of clapped and acknowledged it and, like, kind of smiled at the ref and was like, yeah, you got it right. And I'm like, no, like, be pissed off. Like, you're 6 of 19. You're not playing well at all. And it's like, I didn't like Dallas's general disposition. Like, I'm kind of being tongue in cheek about it, but I did not like how they came out in this game. So part of it is also the tone early on, where it's like, wait, why is Boston? It was the first few minutes. It's like, wait, why is Boston like getting all these rebounds and crashing in on us when we're not, we're still trying to get warmed up. We haven't played in a week. And it's like, it took them a while to get into the game, as you mentioned earlier. So I think that's part of it as well. It's like, I didn't like their energy off the bat. There are some things that they could change to sort of narrow this gap a little bit. I still think Boston's a better team, and as we said, should win the series, but I still think that Dallas is live in this, and I still give them probably a better chance than most people consuming this, because we were talking about this going into it. And I think there are some things that Dallas can do, even though game one was what it was.
Brian, I'm gonna ask you for this. Am I allowed to do some hindsight 2020 confirmation bias shit right now?
Like what?
I mean, I've been doing it all episode, Matt, so I hope we're allowed to do it.
Am I a victim of this?
You are not a victim of it. The Dallas Mavericks are a victim of it. There's a quote from Luka Doncic at Media Day that said, "We deserve this." And I shared that and was like, huh. Luka rolled up in a very nice car tonight. Very nice car on the road. Very not a home game. We rolled him in a very nice car. My point here is that I did get the sense, and like, I wasn't at media. I'll be in Dallas for the games next week. We'll see where their heads are at then. I did get the sense that like the Mavericks were like, this is how I felt about the Wolves going into that Mav series, where when Karl Anthony Towns was like, man, we're just so happy to be in the moment after winning game 7. I was like, no, like, not done. Like, this moment immediately transitions to the next one. And it felt very much this week like the Mavericks were just like, yeah. And the Celtics, on the other hand, were like, we have suffered so much humiliation and failed so many times. No one's taking it from us this time. And so now the question becomes, how do they react in game 2? So let's talk about the game 2 line. I'll do that after I let you know the buckets is presented by BetMGM. You can use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet does not win. For new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Bonus code ACTION will give new users in North Carolina $150 in bonus bets for betting just $5. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or over. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right. Game 2 line is out. We will go ahead and break that down right now. The Boston Celtics are -7.5. Jim at BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. Guess what? It's Celtics -105. They're still expecting and taking money on the Dallas Mavericks after game 1. The total is out at 214.5. No movement there. Mavs are +230 on the money line. Celtics -300. So I will ask you, spread. Is it okay? So too short would be the Celtics are favored by too many. Too long would be the Celtics aren't favored by enough. Is it too short or too long on the Celtics side?
I'm going to give the world's most annoying answer and say that I think I'm probably going to be avoiding the spread the rest of the series, barring anything funky. Woo! I really wanted to be on this game 1 spread, and now I want to go into the player prop world. I think if you're going to attack it, you really want, I know, we love the same game parlays. I think that's how you want to do it. I think you want to script these games now. I think if you want to be on Dallas, I think you do it how Brian said. I think you do PJ Washington threes, you do Kyrie 25 plus. I think you script these games now because the lines are going to be the lines for this first game. I think you and I, Matt, agreed that it was bad. It was not a good line, that they were comfortable taking money because they wanted all that public Dallas money. This 7.5, they've now adjusted a little bit. The game 1 trend is no longer there. I now think this is a reasonable number. I think if anything, maybe I would be on the Boston side of things. But if I'm on the Boston side of things, I want to build a little script around it. I want to put Derek White threes again. I want to put Tatum rebound. I want to put some of those player props with it that I'm more comfortable with, because the spread to me on its own is pretty sharp right now, and I'm pretty surprised they moved to 7.5. It's now on the other side of that. We're not NFL, but that the key number that Fiddle has talked about, that 7, going from 6.5 to 7.5, I don't think is anything. I think it's an acknowledgement of just how good Boston is matchup wise, more so than how they looked, which I think they don't usually overreact to how one game goes, right? Moving it in a finals from a over that 7, I think is pretty telling. And it's telling me I don't want to be on the spread. I want to be doing player props. Or if I'm doing the spread, it's got to be a same game parlay with a script attached to it.
It felt very much like, I mean, I said this all week that I thought that the books were suckering in everybody. I said this pretty openly, that I felt that the books were very much like, we can get away with posting this at 5.5 and taking money to 6.5, because people are still going to want Dallas. Like, they're at zero risk on that because they knew that they would just take Dallas money because of where the perception was at. I have this modeled 8. We're at 7.5 now, so I don't love this. This is no longer like, oh man, because when it was 5.5, I was like automatic. At 6.5, I was like, yes, sir. But now that we're at 7.5, I'm like, all right, I'm down to a half point of value versus the projection. I can't adjust it off of game 1 just because the matchups worked in the direction that I thought. Brian, do you think it's too short, too long? Should the Celtics be favored by more or less than 7.5 in game 2?
7.5 probably feels about right. Because I mean, that's what I guessed when we were talking about a 7.5, 8.5. I'd be curious to see if it moves, like if we wake up tomorrow and it's went in either direction. Because I actually don't know what direction I think it would go. I'm intrigued to see where the first half number is, because this could be like a bounce back half for Dallas, maybe that they actually figure out some things and then Boston inevitably responds later, and then we have a close game. The full game spread, I'm probably staying away from, but first half is something that I may look at depending on what it is and depending on how I feel come Sunday. Other than that, yeah, player prop world for me, which is my preference anyway, because I can't stand basketball spreads sometimes.
Brian, you talked about wanting 2-2 after 4 games. Are you intrigued by Dallas money line in game 2? I kind of think instead of this, if you're going to play Dallas, I'd want to be on the money line more than the spread. I don't know. Are you there too?
Yeah, I agree. Generally, when it comes to basketball for me, betting, if you think a team is going to keep it that close, you might as well just take them to win, especially in a playoff series, right? Because in a playoff,
I almost wonder if like not even just a money line, but like a Dallas minus like 12.5, just because again, there's all this crazy variance here. I wonder if like Dallas by double digits is the play even more so, like the full top tier escalator of being on Dallas is just to take them minus 9.5, because a close game at home, the Celtics might be looking decent. Whereas if it's just Dallas and a runaway, Boston makes none of their threes. Again, maybe to keep mentioning the same game parlay script, maybe it's, a couple of those, it's KP isn't hitting this game, so it's Porzingis unders. He'll play less in a blowout anyways. It's, alt spread for the Mavs, and it's PJ Washington threes or something that gets you like 20-1 or something crazy like that.
I don't have the balls to do a double digit all spread for Dallas. I could see. I don't think they're gonna shoot. Maybe this is the letdown spot for Boston. I don't know. But player prop wise, we talked about it. Like I do think there has to be some sort of bounce back scoring wise for Jason Tatum. PJ Washington, I think, has to hit his threes at some point. Kyrie Irving, I don't think is going to shoot 6 for 19 all series long. Maybe game 2 is a spot. I do think he'll also get. I was on his assists. It did not hit tonight. I'm probably going to go back into that world. And if he flops again, then I guess I'll just get off of it. But I still think that the ball pressure should make him more of a playmaker and not somebody who's going to dribble like, he's a deer in the headlights and just turning the ball over and making stupid decision after stupid decision.
Got a lot of folks hanging out with us in the chat. Appreciate you guys being with us. John Couch says that there's a -7 out there in the market. Julio says it's going to get steamed up to 8.5, wait, and then take the Mavs. Brian Rhodes says, how is Celtics first half not good? If the Mavs figured out, it'll take all of game 2, right? Possibly. That's like, I have seen games like that where if the series kind of starts to tilt, it is usually in that second game headed back to the other arena. Is like, okay, you test out stuff, you get hit with momentum coming off the good vibes of game 1, and then the second half, you start to make your adjustments, you make a little bit of run, you carry that momentum over. I mean, I do think Dallas needs to find something in this game. I'm not saying that they're going to get swept, because I understand all of the reasons why that's unlikely to happen with Boston, but Dallas has not been good enough at home to feel like, oh yeah, they're definitely going to take care of business.
Right.
That's concerning. However, got some trends for you. Game 2 of the finals as a home favorite after winning and covering game 1. Okay. Happened 16 times, only 16 times since 2003. Okay. Which, hey, that's 16 of 20 some odd years. Pretty good. So we got a lot big sample here. Straight up, only 8-8 against the spread, 6-9-1, 40%.
There's a little bit of that zigzag theory maybe at
A
work.
little bit of the zigzag theory with an average line of 6 and an average ATS margin of minus 0.1. So it's like a real tight spread here. It kind of tells you, in defense of Jim, the extreme coward here, that there probably is a lot of reason to stay away from this, that this is probably lined correctly. And that if you're, I would say that I would only look Dallas here. I don't know if I'll get there, but I would only look Dallas ATS. I also don't know if they're going to win, I think is a problem. Like, that's kind of my thing here, Brian, is most of the time, and we talk about the Matt Mitchell rule here all the time. If you cover, you win as a dog. But because Boston is, I think I agree with you, generally overrated, and now we're moving back to a place where they're properly rated. We're closer to where I think that should be. And we've seen them not handle their business ATS. There's probably reason. I do kind of agree here with Julio of if they take money, and look, the early line is indicating the opposite, that they're expecting Mavs money again. But if this gets bumped up to 8.5, I think I probably will go ahead and play at least a little bit back on Dallas here in game 2.
Yeah, I could see myself doing that.
Shocker.
I mean, look, I liked 2-2 after 4 coming into this.
You did. Yep.
Because my theory was, I didn't say Dallas was going to win game 1 as part of that equation. I said that I could see this splitting both ways, because Dallas isn't like a home juggernaut. Boston isn't either in the playoffs. Both are actually better on the road. Luka in particular is better on the road. I think we'll see more of that in game 2. If it goes up to 8.5, yeah, Dallas number will be tempting. And at that point, I wonder what the money line would be. You probably get some really good value there.
Yeah, what is the money line right now, Matt?
At BetMGM, the king of sports books, it is Mavs plus 230, Celtics minus 300.
230 is interesting.
Yeah. A little half unit, you know what I'm saying? but that's what this is to me. It's like I think we could get really caught up in saying a series is over after one game.
Absolutely, 100%. But but on the other end of that spectrum, though, is like we do have like a wide history that actually says that, like, I will go ahead and look this up for you. Teams that win game 1 in the finals at home are 46-13 at 78%.
But we want this to go 6 because we took over 5.5 when we.
And they have to listen to us.
There's no
Joe Valero also. Joe
here.
Also. Like
me with the minus 2.5 little escalator play. Short. If this goes long, I'm just gonna wind up losing all my bets and then not betting the last game of the season, which would be very sad for me.
Wait, Matt, what that number you just gave, was that can you clarify what that was? Sorry, the 46 and 13
in the finals, teams that start the series with home court advantage, so they start the series at home. If they win game 1, they are 46-13 in the series.
Oh, so this is like all of finals history or something?
Yes.
Okay.
Not since 2003. This is all of finals history via whowins.com. Interestingly, and this is in line with that stat I gave you about the ATS trends for game 2. Game 2, they're only 33-26 at 56%.
It does feel like game 2 is an interesting spot for sure.
It's got to be Mavs or nothing here.
Yeah,
I'll say that like after that Boston performance, just like I didn't like all of Dallas coming in like we deserve this and feeling and look at my purple car. I'm worried that we're going to get a bunch of media days between now and Sunday that are going to be the Boston Celtics being like, it's been a hard road. It's been a long journey and we're just so glad to be here. And no,
Derek
Yeah.
White's going to pull up in a Maserati and Matt's going to unload 5 units on Dallas money line.
Accurate. By the way, teams that go up 2-0 at home are 28-5 in the series. So
Yeah,
if Dallas is going to win this thing, they do need to win game 2.
have to. Dallas is not going to beat Boston 4 out of 5
at
games.
5 times.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's
Especially if they're taking 26 threes. I think Brian really nailed it with, like, if Dallas has any chance, it really they have to take more threes. They're not going to win the game not taking threes against Boston.
So maybe that's like a target here, is try and find something. Now, some of this is just like, when we go back and watch, you're going to notice if you go back and do a rewatch, you're going to notice that like they didn't generate all those open PJ Washington corner threes.
Well, and that was kind of my thing. I was on Luka under assist for the series because, like, if you're to draw up a team that like doesn't really have to do all of the like send a ton of help at Luka, this is the team that can kind of switch. They have good matchups for him. It was why I was on Luka under assists, and I do think that if you're a Mavs backer, if you're a Mavs fan, that is the biggest worry, is that absolutely came true of, like, they didn't generate anything, and I don't know how they would. That's where I keep getting hung up on trying to get to Dallas and not getting there, because they just don't have the matchup and the personnel to make Boston scramble.
So I mean, yeah, that's a lot of this is like, look, if you're going to play switch all, right, you're never going to wind up in a situation where you're going to get beasted in an individual matchup. And the concern there is like, well, yeah, but they have Luka Doncic. But again, like, it's a little bit mitigated, and Luka, I don't think, plays now. I'll be interested to see what happens in game 2 if he's more deliberate. But they don't have like this. The big thing here is compare this to, say, if they face Denver. You can't switch on to Nikola Jokic. You can't do that. He's going to run you back through pick and roll with your small defending the big. And I will say this from Boston played great in a lot of areas tonight. If we get past shooting and execution and we talk about strategy, they put Luka into everything. And it wasn't just, oh, we're going to run pick and roll at you. It was, we're going to run pick and roll when we know that you're the low man trying to guard the paint, because that's all you guys have done. And we're going to make you run from the inside of the paint to close out on these shooters. And you saw Luka giving up shots to Sam Hauser. Like, that's how they generated those shots, which is like double bonus. You get an open look for Hauser because Luka can't close out, and Luka's having to run more and exhaust himself. So like those little things I think are going to matter. But yeah, getting up those threes I think definitely does matter. Now is the part of the show where I try and play the devil and talk Brian Fonseca into betting the Mavericks to win the NBA title. Brian, the Dallas Mavericks at BetMGM, the king of sports books, are currently plus 325. You're getting 325 from a closing line of plus 180 to beat these quote unquote fraudulent Boston Celtics. All you need is for Dallas steals game 2. Luka has a monster game 3 at home, and all of a sudden, all those historical markers are shaken. Can I interest you in plus 325, Brian?
You could interest me in it. I don't know if I'm going to definitively do it. But I think this poses an interesting question, though. It's like, if you think Dallas is going to bounce back and win game 2, are you better off just taking the 325 and trying to take a shot at them winning the championship? Or are you better off just taking them in game 2 and just waiting? I kind of think it's the latter.
I do too.
235 is not all that much shorter than 325. Like
that's part of it.
Obviously there is a gap there, but like I was surprised it was as long as 235. And then when you read the series, I was a little bit surprised it was as short as 325. Now it makes sense given that I think we all kind of thought Boston was going to win game 1, that didn't jump to some astronomical number. But I would rather just play game 2 personally.
Yeah.
So got some numbers here from Tito, producer extraordinaire, that I'm going to change that. That's not good enough. Tito, the dynamite producer. He's dynamite. Tito's amazing. He makes the show run. Mavericks plus 2.5, minus 150 on the series spread line. So plus 2.5 wins. So to just get 2 games in the series is still minus 150. There's also a minus 130. Like, I'm telling you, that's how much the public loved the Mavericks.
That is wild.
that these books cannot, they can't, the Boston Celtics just wiped the floor with them from start to finish with historical markers that say that they win 78% of the time if they win game one, and you still have to pay minus 130 is the shortest price on plus 2.5. If you want to go the full other way, though, Brian, if you go to Mavericks in 6 or less, it's Mavericks minus 1.5 is plus 600.
No, you can't.
Nope.
Because I just said they're not going to beat them
4 out of 5.
Well, yeah, right. So it's like they would have to do that. And I told you I liked Dallas in 7 in a game 7 spot if it got to 7.
Yeah, I think that's part of the play for sure.
I didn't like Dallas in 6 because it's like, do I really think they're gonna just Boston's gonna win twice? That doesn't feel right. But the whole thing is like the reason why you can talk yourself into Dallas in 7 is because do you trust Luka Doncic in a road game 7? Absolutely. Do you trust Kyrie Irving in a road game 7? Yes. Do you trust the Celtics in a home game 7? You should, but like we saw this last year.
If we get to game 7, Brian, I need you to reserve me all the seats on your bay. Like I'll be riding shotgun with you. Absolutely. If we get to a game 7 in Boston.
I hope we get to the game 7 because we haven't had a game 7 in 7.
That'll be so fun.
Yeah.
I'm so tired, guys. Why would you do that to me? I want to go on vacation. I'm ready to be done. I had a really good conversation on Twitter actually about whether or not that's true. So like my gut instinct is yes. I would ultimately just not bet it because you do have to keep in mind that like the historical markers are just like no. Like home team wins it. Like, in the finals more than any other round, the home team wins that game 7. Especially like the home team, the favorite, like they just win. On the other hand, I'm not betting against Luka Doncic in the game 7 with a chance to like absolutely demolish an entire city. No thanks. I'm good. So like I'm praying not for that because I really don't want to be the content producer that's like, I don't have a bet on game 7. I don't want to do that. So I'm really hoping against that. By the way, again, is another signal of where this price is in the market, plus 1.5. So Mavs to get to 7 or win the series outright. You get both of those outcomes and how many games it takes is plus 140 in the market. So
weird numbers.
I know. I know. I'm telling you. I mean, but I will say this. Patrick Everson had this over on for Better Collective. And we had a story on it as well from Malik Smith. You can catch it in the Action Network app that talked about like how public this is the biggest public dog. I do not recall, nor does any data suggest that there has been a bigger public dog than this.
That's wild.
People love them some Luka. They love them.
Or hate them some Boston.
And hate them some Boston. I think that's a lot of it too. One more thing before we get out of here. Let's talk to MVP. So I have to track it because I was doing stuff and so I was busy, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. Brandon Anderson, first off, Brandon Anderson got Kristaps Porzingis at 60-1. He gave it out as best bet. Brandon Anderson's very smart. Okay. In game, I grabbed it at 14-1 after he looked like that. I went ahead and grabbed that. Current market, Jason Tatum minus 105, Jaylen Brown plus 300, Luka's plus 325. Kristaps is plus 700. Kyrie Irving is now 40-1. So
wow.
If you want a buy low spot on Kyrie Irving to win Finals MVP, this is the one. Let me know in the chat what you think is the best Finals MVP bet between Tatum minus 105, Jaylen Brown plus 300, Luka plus 325, Kristaps 7-1, or Kyrie Irving 40-1. Unless you got somebody else you want to take Derek White or anybody else. Derek White, by the way, 66-1. Jim, you talked about it early. Like, I'm very happy with having the Jaylen Brown position. I think I'll probably bet him again. Like, this number, and this is how I felt in the ECF too, where the books just cannot get away from the fact of like, no, Tatum's their best player and he does all these things. And it's kind of not, I don't think it reflects how they played this season. I don't think it reflects how they've played in these playoffs. And it genuinely, to me, I'll say this, I don't even think that Tatum's playing badly. It's not that. It's just a matter of, I don't think that the Mavericks are going to over adjust where they just let Tatum do whatever because he will tear them up. So they're going to keep some of these principles. And I just think Jaylen's going to continue to have really big moments game to game. I liked him in the ECF, and that wasn't why I picked him here. I bet him back in like before the playoffs. I wanted Jaylen Brown Finals MVP. I think I'm probably going to bet him again here because to me, Jaylen Brown at plus 300 is not the right price.
My biggest worry, and I'll flip it back to you just for a second first, because my biggest worry, honestly, with it is these awards. We've talked about a trillion times, right? You're not betting who is going to be the best player. You're betting who is going to get voted for the award. Is there any quick turnaround fatigue in that, like, oh, we did Jalen his solid. We gave him the Eastern Conference Finals MVP. And a lot of people right after were like, Tatum had the better series. Does he really have to like have a notably better series than Tatum to get that award again, or do we think it's new voter? I mean, it is new voters. The new voters aren't going to weigh that as much. I'm curious. Again, it's trying to solve people's minds. I do worry a little bit about that part of it for JB.
I think so much of it is who had the signature moments. You have to have the stats. You have to be within range on the stats. But like some of the most memorable nice moments tonight are going to be those KP shots, but it's also going to be the steal by Jaylen Brown and the dunk. It's going to be the block that he had in that second half. He had a couple of huge blocks. Like Jaylen had signature moments that are going to stick with the voters' minds. I think those are hugely impactful, Brian.
I think Jaylen Brown is probably the best value right now because I also think what he's doing is the most sustainable right now. Just because Kristaps Porzingis, I mean, he's the walking matchup problem, but realistically, there's still an injury concern that I have. Like, what if he tweaks it again? Because this has happened with calf strains before. What if he tweaks it again in game 3? He has to leave, whatever the case may be. I also am not sure he's gonna like. Dallas has to make an adjustment on him, and maybe
when he only played 20 minutes. I think this is the wrong time to buy on KP. Like if we saw 30 minutes, I'd be more intrigued. But he just had such a good game in such a short minute window. I don't think this is a time to buy on him.
In theory, it'll build up to 26, 31.
Yeah.
But like I think Jaylen Brown, though, given what we've seen, like he's probably the best value right now. He's at a good number. I definitely would not buy in on Tatum yet, even though I do think he's going to bounce back and have a better scoring game. I don't know how good it's going to be, but I think he's going to have some better performances in terms of scoring. But I agree, man. Like I don't think he's playing poorly really at all. He's just not been the best player on his team, and that's fine. This is Boston's whole ethos. Like they're supposed to be a machine. It's not a, hey, here's somebody who's going to be our best player every single night. It's like, no, it can kind of rotate because you have 3 guys who are all-star caliber and then 2 star role players, if you will. Like there's going to be a Derek White game at some point where he probably goes ballistic, we would think. But yeah, I think so far, like if you're looking at who was the MVP of this individual effort, it's a conversation between Jaylen Brown and Kristaps Porzingis. It's probably KP for now because of what he did was very, very loud. But I think Jaylen Brown could have this type of performance consistently throughout the series. Kristaps Porzingis should, but I don't know that specifically defensively.
Jay Money's in the chat and just said, "I named my son Jalen." Just out of nowhere. By the way, somebody else in our chat said that they gave out Porzingis first quarter points leader plus 1,000, 10-1 in the Action Network chat earlier. So hopefully someone tailed him. Brian Rhodes says also Tatum getting double-double is a big help. 1 down, Jim.
Did they say 1 down, 3 to go? That's so insulting to Dallas. I love it.
I was about to say 1 down, 3 to go. So I've just jinxed the Boston Celtics. Yeah, Riley Lopez says if Tatum gets a double-double every game, he's my bankroll MVP. So there you go. Yep. One more thing before we get out of here, Brian, as I continue to play the devil, at BetMGM, you can bet specifically Mavericks in 7 is plus 775. That's
definitely the play. If you're getting on Dallas, that has to be the play, right, Brian?
Yeah, it has to be 7 because if it's 6, it's because of injury or something that we can't foresee yet. Like I don't overreact to game 1s. I don't think a series is over after game 1. I also don't think Boston is gonna suddenly lose 4 of the next 5 games and then lose a series at 6. So like if you like Dallas to really win game 2, they would have to win game 2, I feel like. But if you like Dallas to win game 2, you ought to look at Dallas to win in 7. Plus 700. I mean, shit, you could put like a 1/10 of a unit on that and still pretty fine.
Pretty good. All right, it's got to do it for Buckets Live. Thanks for joining us. My thanks to Dynamite producer Tito for helping me out doing the show as we started the 4th quarter. We'll be back for game 2. We'll start in the 4th quarter, same deal, and we'll react for the game 3 line headed to Dallas. You can catch that on Sunday night. Make sure to tune in for that on youtube.com/the Action Network. Tomorrow, Friday, we will have a best bets episode. So we'll have actual best bets for game 2. We'll have official best bets for it. Thanks for joining us on Buckets Live. My thanks to Jim Turby and Brian Fonseca for hanging out with me, as well as David Payne, our audio producer, putting this version up on our podcast if you're listening to it. Make sure to download the Action Network app. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you guys again for game 2 of the NBA Finals. Till then, let's get buckets.